So
I'm so sorry.
yes, but you're here. This is good.
I was
So
walking the dog. I apologize.
we got through all the behind the scenes things. So we're just going to jump in with questions. My SAPA husband says that his recovery healing can't be successful if I can't leave the past in the past. He requires we not speak of his addictive behaviors or the results of those behaviors upon me, the betrayed partner. How is our relationship supposed to heal if he won't talk about anything having to do with the addictions or recovery for himself or us?
It won't heal. It's not going to heal without not just a space to discuss that, but not just what happened, but how you felt, how he felt, and I have to say that this is why people go to treatment, because you guys some couples get so mired. Sometimes someone they get on their rock and they're going to stick on that rock, and that's the rock they're going to die on. And I would hate to think that the rock your marriage dies on is your husband's unwillingness to open up to you, because the reality of I can only imagine, like most sex addicts, he's not open about a lot of things. And I'm sure this isn't the only issue where you feel like, I wish he would be more honest. I wish he'd be more available. So one thing that I would ask you to look at your relationship and see, in how many ways do you really want your husband to show up other than being a part of this? Not that this isn't the most important thing, but I have a feeling there's more of his unavailability than this. And then the other question I just want to ask you is, who has the power here? I mean, I guess if he can say whatever he wants to do and you just have to accept it. What you asked me, really what I was asked just now, Tammy, was um, how can I get him to be more willing to talk about this? Like somehow the partner feels responsible for getting him to do something. And I don't think that ever works very well. I think the partner, you have to take care of yourself. If you don't feel comfortable in a marriage where you have no idea what's happened, you don't trust him, you don't feel safe, and he won't talk about it, then that's the marriage that's right for you. But if you're not comfortable with that marriage, then you may have to figure out what it's going to take to move him off the dime. And it probably isn't going to be anything you say. It's kind of probably going to be more what you do. What are you just tried to hide that thing? Is that gum? Are you chewing
No,
gum in class, Tammy? Is the hall,
Ricolas.
oh, okay. Is the hall
So
monitor is
otherwise
not
I'm going to have
allowing?
otherwise I'm going to have a coughing fit. So I'm going to keep
Hmm,
muting,
hmm.
but my voice gets tickly. So the Ricolas are going to work. So no, I was thinking the same thing. I thought, wow, I mean, I'm usually full of hope but I'm like, well, I don't feel like there's hope if it's like, you have to be shut down because, but for whatever reason, it's like, that's in the past. I mean, give me a break. I bet the feelings are palpable to you. Like, even as you wrote that, I bet you had some feelings of that. So that doesn't just, shut down. Dr. Rob has talked before about like, oh, it's in our past. I stopped doing all that 3 weeks ago. And so, even though it's been over decades, you should be over this. And what's wrong with you? Here's flowers and candy. Let's go on. That's just not how this all works. So next question. Why can't some sex addicts perform sexually within the marriage, but have no issues performing with the affair partner, assuming the relationship with the affair partner is long-term relationship?
Um, well, I think if someone's a sex addict, it doesn't matter whether they're having sex with an affair partner or a sex worker or with porn or in those situations, especially with an affair partner. We have a big C word that is very important to us as addicts, and the word is control. If that person is a short term or medium term or as much as I feel like going to it term relationship, then I have control. That person can't hurt me or let me down. I don't have much invested there. And just don't forget, the affairs give you everything. You get all the fun, the entertainment, the excitement, the sex, and partners are burdened with everything else. And so you are seen as the difficult one because he's got to deal with all this stuff with you. And the affair partner is just so light and easy. So number one, I think that those of us who have these issues need to feel a lot of control in our relationships in general. And when we're at the worst end of our behavior, which is acting out, that's all about control. That's about getting other people to do what we want them to do so we'll feel better about ourselves or something like that. So what else do you want to say about this, Tammy, about control? That's where I was going.
Well, I was thinking,
Oh,
in a
about the sex
relationship,
part,
yeah, no, in a
right?
relationship, there are expectations and caring, and there's feelings and there's emotions, and with an affair partner, it's, it's, or sex outside the marriage in whatever form it takes. It's not only control, but it's also unreal. It's like, it isn't taking out the garbage. It isn't paying the bills. It isn't any of those things. So, it's a very different reality. But the control really, I'm sure, is at the base of it.
I wanted to add one more thing, which is this concept of intensity over intimacy. Sex addicts feel very safe when there's a lot of intensity. I will feel more safe. I mean, hopefully not at this point in my life, but as an active addict, I would feel more safe going to a terrible part of town at 3 a.m. to find a sex partner. It didn't occur to me I like lose my life or anything bad would happen to me. But for me to be intimate with my partner, to be open, to be honest, to be willing to be openly sexual, that's terrifying. That's where I'm really scared. That's where I'm really vulnerable. And as addicts, we mistake intensity for intimacy. What you want, you're right all along. You want us to be fully connected and to be intimate with you. We aren't. We are with you and we love you and we're connected to you. But when we're acting out, we're not intimate with you because of all these secrets. In fact, one of the things that couples have to deal with, sex addicts in particular, when you're in the healing phase, is that the addict is no longer in control. Now the partner is calling the shots, and we do not like that at all. But we've had control because we had the information. When we control the information, where I've been, what I've done, who I've been with, and you don't know, then I'm the one who's in charge of what I let you in on and what I don't, and how, all of that stuff. So recovery involves a lot of letting go of control. And one of the things that control over sex partners and going to intensity rather than intimacy provides us as sex addicts is it is a way to distance ourselves from our own trauma. Whatever our early trauma experiences were, it mostly involved love and connection and fear around those things. I know I grew up with love and connection and fear all put together. So when I love you, my spouse, fear also comes up for me, and feelings that I don't even understand what they are because they have to do with things that happened to me so long ago I don't remember. But when I'm with a stranger, no, those feelings come up. I feel perfectly fine. I'm in charge, I'm in control. But with you, I'm vulnerable. And I can, and ladies and gentlemen, I will say to you that every sex addict, if they're being honest, would say it's easier to go out there and have sex with any stranger than it is to be sexual with you, because then I have to be vulnerable. Then I have to risk it's not going to work. I'm not going to get it up, whatever it is. And we don't like being vulnerable. We like to care for ourselves on our own. So it sex with you guys rubs up against, excuse the pun, so many of our really challenging emotional experiences that we just move away.
So the next question, do mother and mesh men, sex addicts, turn their spouses into their mother as this is the only way they know how to experience love? And once the spouse is the mother, they can't sexually function in the relationship?
I don't think sexual functioning in the relationship is just about mom. I think it's about, as I said, us not knowing how to be intimate. We're not intimate in a whole bunch of ways. So sex is just one form of intimacy. But when you folks are involved with a sex or love, involved with a sex addict, you look at your lives, you know that we're distant from you in so many ways. There's so many times you partners say, I wish we weren't connected, or I wish, sometimes I feel like you're really distant, or we don't, all of that. You feel it and we're not really there. So let me go back to the question. Oops, Tammy dropped my question.
No, I did not.
No, I got it.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Do mother and mesh men, sex addicts, turn their spouse into their mother?
Right. So I don't think that anyone turns you into anyone. I think that this is what I think. I think by being emotionally unavailable and lying and keeping secrets and all that, we turn our partners into distant, angry, untrusting, sometimes nagging. In other words, I hear very often from your partners, I became someone I never wanted to be. Now, maybe that reminds us of our mothers. I don't know, but I think that we do we often turn you through our distancing and all that into people that you never wanted to be. And, whatever bad version of you is out there, I'm sure that mirrors it isn't that you're the same as mom, but I get those kinds of feelings that inside of me that I got with mom. And that's unrelated to sex. The two things are really quite different. There is a great book by Ken Adams called Mother. There's
When
two,
He's
Married to Mom.
And
Right. And
Silently Seduced.
right. And Silently Seduced. And they're
Yeah.
really both fantastic books on this topic.
Yeah. Well, and my perception of a lot of this is that the partners are the outsider, because that bond with mom, it would be a betrayal to the bond with mom if they really fully engaged with you. So it's very complicated. I really encourage you. Dr. Rob did a podcast with Dr. Ken Adams on sex, love, and addiction. Listen to that. There's lots more resources out there. Very complicated. There is help. Okay. Is it possible that I do not have much, if any, childhood trauma, but by some very lucky process still ended up with a sex addict as a spouse?
Well, I wrote this great book called Prodependence, which really speaks to the fact that I don't think every partner has trauma. I don't think that every partner has terrible histories. I mean, some of you do. And certainly if you end up acting them out with us, I don't think it's because you intend to. I think it's because we send you into so much trauma that you end up feeling some of what you felt like in your, when you were younger. But this is what I think. I think we fall in love with whoever we fall in love with, for whatever reasons we fall in love with them. And I don't think that necessarily needs to be put into, well, he reminds me of my mother, or this from my father, or love is just love is love. But how is it? Do sex and mothers says it can only have experience of love once
Is
a
it
spouse?
possible that I do not
Right.
have much, if any, childhood trauma,
Right.
but by some lucky process still
Right.
ended up with a
Right.
sex addict?
I'm still trying to find the question so I come back to them. For some reason, I can't. So
Are you in open? Because I think there might be an answer. So check the top and see. Because if you're
open, yes, I'm in open.
open, okay.
But
It's
anyway,
the
that's
top
not
one.
such a big
Yeah.
deal.
It's
Yeah, I have my
602.
SH has been sober for a year.
Nope,
Oh,
it's from 602. So
I don't have a
anyway,
602. Everything my thing says 5.
maybe because you
Anyway,
joined later. So keep going. Let's talk about
why don't
childhood
you
trauma.
answer that? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I agree, codependence, but I also agree, not necessarily there's anything, you just love a person and that person's broken, and there is
Right.
qualified help and healing. And you
And
both
through
can be
their
different.
brokenness, I'm sorry,
Mhm.
Tammy,
Mhm.
through their brokenness and their challenges, some of our issues will come up. If I have a spouse who's distant and what they say doesn't feel right to me, and I remember I had parents who were distant. The challenges I had in childhood will come up for me in this new relationship. So did you have trauma? No, not necessarily. But do parts of you that are very kind of broken and young, and do they show up when you're so unhappy? Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you grew up with trauma. And this book I wrote called Prodependence is about that, because I think codependency and the whole notion of that really says there is something wrong with you for marrying us. There's something wrong with you for staying with us. And I don't think there's anything wrong with you at all. I mean, some of you may have issues, but that doesn't mean you need to look at them. We, however, drive you crazy. And then you have to go into therapy, whether you like it or not, just to, get back on solid ground.
Okay, so next question. I have been clean for nearly 2 years, but I am afraid to connect with someone sexually because I do not want to relapse. Please help. You hear this all the time. People that go, oh, I've got X amount of sobriety, which means they haven't had sex or a relationship in years and years and years. So can you speak to that, please?
Yes, I can. I'm just amazed that I can't read it anywhere. Sex. So, and this is drugs and sex, right? So
it doesn't say, it says I've been clean for nearly 2 years. So yeah, let's proceed with any form of acting.
Well, let's just, all the questions that we answer are not for everybody in the way they're asked. We try to generalize them as much as possible. So I've worked with a lot of people who say that they were hypersexual. They had a lot of sex, and they had a lot of wild sex, and they had a lot of fun sex when they were doing drugs and alcohol. And they thought that, the drugs and alcohol were an add-on. They just went along with the fun sex. And then they stop drinking and using, and they get sober. And all of a sudden, they're not that interested in sex, or sex isn't that fun, or sex isn't. And of course, the reason is because they didn't drink to top off their sexual experience. They drank to tolerate their sexual experiences, and or to disappear into them. And a lot of times when people get sober, they're suddenly faced with their own fears, their own anxieties about intimacy, connection, sexuality, whatever it is, and they don't have the drugs and alcohol to soften it. So they avoid it. And there are a number of women in particular that I have worked with who said, I haven't had sex in 3 years because I just haven't desired it. I haven't wanted it. And part of that says to me that there are some walls that they may have up that weren't taken down when they stopped using. Do you think that was it?
I think that that's really helpful. And I also, in the chat, I put a link. Dr. Rob did the Super Saturday Recovery Summit in the rooms last month. We have another one this upcoming Saturday, so join us if you can. But he talked about why is sex better when I'm high, and so I think some of that may be helpful too. One of the things that Dr. Rob talks about often on this particular webinar, though, is about sober dating and how do you do this and how you get a posse. And I mean, I believe, and Dr. Rob has shared too, that we really believe that we are supposed to be in a relationship, and so just being sober, at all costs, there's ways to date sober. There, in fact, there was Ken Page has Intimacy, Sobriety, and Search for Real Love. That was on the same tag on in the rooms, and he talked about sober dating. And there's a whole website for doing things in a different way, going deeper, in a so it's not just swipes. So don't give up. You don't have to relapse, but you can date. Okay, next question. I was diagnosed with a love and sex addiction recently and have been in a bumpy recovery, but have learned so much about myself in the process. I just learned my mother is schizophrenic and has been since I was a child. This explains a lot. How can I resume our relationship without relapsing? I'm doing well so far, and this is all still new. Thank you for everything you do.
So do you think this person is talking about renewing the relationship with their mother?
Yes, that's what I read.
So we don't know the reasons why that relationship broke down, but I can just tell you about having a mentally ill mother. That's probably my mother was profoundly, well, my mom was bipolar, but often psychotic, and psychotic is psychotic. It doesn't matter whether you're schizophrenic or you're bipolar. When you start hearing people tell you that you're about to walk to the moon, you probably are in the same boat. And I have to tell you, first of all, there are books on growing up with a mentally ill parent that I highly would recommend you consider. I would suggest, by the way, going to NAMI groups, National Association of the Mentally Ill, or AMI groups, Association for the Mentally Ill, because AMI and NAMI are places where people like us can go talk about what it was like to grow up with a crazy parent. The other part is that, and I don't know what your resources are for therapy, but I think that as a young child, I took on some of my mother's pain, and I took on some of her confusion, and I took on some of her. And I remember being in therapy, and I would get really depressed about whatever. And my therapist said, that doesn't seem like something you would be depressed about, but I think your mother. And then I realized, like, sometimes she was so depressed that the way I could feel close to her was I would be depressed. So part of growing up with crazy parents, unlike healthy parents, can differentiate themselves from you. If you have something confusing happen, they're like, oh no, this, then that. Crazy parents, so I think it takes us a long time to see the reality of ourselves in particular, and then the reality of other relationships. I don't know if you guys think about it this way, but as a therapist, I understand that when you're 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, you don't really see yourself. You don't have, it's kind of like my dog, no offense. My dog doesn't know that he exists. He walks right by a mirror. So let's say in your first 2 years, you don't know you exist, blah, 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 you don't know what's going on. The way you learn about who you are and your very existence is by how people respond to you. Oh, when I smile, someone does this. Oh, when I'm crying, someone does that. And slowly, in some very primitive way, you form by their reactions who you are. It's not the entire thing, but it's really early. And so I had to go back and say, I got these weird responses. I got all these strange, how did I decide, for example, I can be very hypervigilant. I can read everybody in the room and see everything that's going on. Is that really who I am? Somebody who's suspicious and no, but that's who I grew up to be as a kid, because I saw my crazy mom, and it's like, is she going to scream or cry or throw, I was like, so I think there's a lot of pieces that are tied up inside of us to that very experience that need to be untied by understanding their craziness better. And in the end, I had to forgive her, because boy, here's a situation with mentally ill parent, they absolutely give us the most they can. Absolutely. And whatever they give could never be enough for what we need. And that's often what I say about broken parents with kids. It's like, I believe that you give us everything that you can, everything you want to, everything you believe we need. It's just sometimes it doesn't meet what we need. And that's where the problem is. Sorry about your
And
mom.
yeah, I am too. And I'm glad you're in recovery. And get support. You're here, fantastic. But a sponsor, a therapist. I mean, get a team around you that can help. And yeah. And I don't know what the right boundaries are going to be, but setting boundaries about what is going to be healthy interaction for you with support. Like I'm
Mm,
calling my sponsor because I'm going to go talk to my mom. I'm just having a phone call with mom, but I'm going to call. And then as soon as I get done with the phone call with I'm calling my sponsor back. I mean, like it's that kind of thing. Get a plan for how you do that, because yeah, your recovery has got to be primary. So glad
mhm.
you're here. Okay, next
One,
question.
one, one
Go
more
ahead.
thing, Tammy brought up
Sure.
boundaries. So, what she's talking about, absolutely. I think more about absolute physical boundaries.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
if I wanted to visit my mom at Thanksgiving, I didn't go stay at her house like I was when I was younger. And I came for Thanksgiving. We had a nice meal. I went back to my hotel. I might see her the next morning for a breakfast, but I controlled the amount of time and the situations so that I could protect myself and still get connected in the way that I felt safe. And so if that helps you at all, I think it is what Cami said. It's about healthy boundaries for yourself.
Right. Okay, so the next question. Thank you so much for hosting the Q&A. I'm a recovering porn addict. Today is 39 days sober. Yay. Unfortunately, lost my marriage due to my addiction.
Mm.
And I'm sorry, I hear that all the time, and it pains me. Our divorce date is tomorrow. Do you have any recommendations for sitting in the feelings or feeling the emotions rather than acting out? Thanks.
Well, I think you're going to have it backwards, which is your entire goal is to not act out. And the way to not act out on difficult days is to stay really connected and close to people who love you and care about you. It would be okay if you were, and it doesn't have to be Southern program. It would be really good for you on that day, if it's tomorrow, to start the day with a call with a friend and then make sure you check out with somebody else after. I know we're not meeting anywhere, but you can talk to lots of people. And I think the more you set up in advance, people to talk to, situations to go to, and we're going to go to this meeting, and these guys have something online for addicts, and you're going to find spaces to work through this. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that there's so much expectation here, but put the acting out aside. um, I remember thinking when my mom dies, I'm going to have so many feelings. And it took me years to work through all the feelings, and it wasn't an immediate, I'm crying and I'm weeping. And so sometimes the expectations we have of what we're supposed to feel, and especially how quickly it might take you years to grieve the marriage. I heard grief in there, didn't you, Tammy? Like,
Yes.
and so if your dog passes away at 9 or 15, you still grieve, you still have that attachment. If someone was abusive to you, even if it was a terrible relationship, you live with them long enough, you're going to miss them. Then you're going to blame yourself for missing an abusive person. The truth is you were attached to them, good or bad. And so I think it'll take a while. I think it's a very addict thing to say, when are the feelings going to come? And I'm going to get ready, and then they'll be over. And this could be a long time, and it isn't going to come when you expect it. It could be something you see, and all of a sudden it reminds you of, and or you run into. Anyway, be kind to yourself. I think I already hear ways you're not being kind to yourself, and it is more important that you stay sober than you work toward having any feelings that you think you should be having.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing. You can't you can't go back and rewind that. You can go forward in a very different way. And I was thinking tomorrow you'll probably make sure you've got all your resources in place. Wednesday is, like, because it's the day after and oh, I made it through that. So like Dr. Rob was talking about, they can come at any time. So be aware, have a plan. I would invite you to like go through your calendar and start making plans at least one thing a day, preferably more, of like, these are positive things for me, connection points. So for at least the next week, longer is better, have a plan, because I think that will help. And you can always add more. You can always, there's a zillion podcasts and webinars on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Plug
And
those in.
there's a zillion podcasts on grief and relationship loss.
Yes.
What you might want to separate is, I did this from this is happening. Because what you did or didn't do is what it is. It's in the past. And that may not be the only reason this person chose to leave. That may have been the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. But if you can say, I did that, and maybe it has, but what you're grieving is the loss of the relationship, regardless of how it ended up that way. I think that's a much healthier way for you to think about it, rather than you're more likely to act out if you sit around and say, well, what exactly did I do wrong that caused this to end? Okay, I'll say one more thing. There are many stages of grief, and one of them that isn't talked about is remorse. And remorse sounds like when we've had a loss, I'm sorry, going to go back. My dog is very healthy, by the way. So, but if I said, my dog died, if my dog died yesterday, I'd probably be thinking things I know I would. I wish I'd played with him more. I wish I'd thrown that ball more. I remember that time you wanted to, and I just didn't. I stayed inside. I will feel badly about things that I could have done to make the relationship better. And ultimately, there's a part of me that thinks if I'd done all this stuff, maybe he wouldn't have died. So remorse is a big part. And I think you have to allow yourself to feel like I could have done better. But ultimately, first of all, it was not just about you. It's about both of you together. And what you're dealing with is grief.
Okay, so the next question. I'm an addict in recovery, and my partner discovered my infidelity a few months ago. Since then, I have admitted my addiction and been in therapy and recovery. How do I properly show my partner that I am taking appropriate action and truly taking the active role in my healing, therapy, and recovery? Should I even try and demonstrate this to her in any way?
How long do you think, did you say how long it was?
It said my partner discovered my infidelity a few months ago. So this is recent.
Okay, Tammy, you want to start with this one?
Well, yes, I was.
Okay, Tammy, you're pulling things out of the mountains right now.
I know. This is out of the doghouse.
A relationship saving guide for men caught cheating.
Yes, but I'm also, if you have not joined the Sex and Porn Addiction 101 work group, that is a practical way of going through the sex addiction book and workbook. And like, to get a solid foundation, because we talk all the time to partners, and I'm like, if their lips are moving, don't believe it. It's what their actions are. So it doesn't matter how much you say, oh, I'm changed, I'm doing this, or whatever. It really is showing up day in and day out, doing things in a different way, so that it's obvious to everyone, not just us addicts who are going like, oh, I'm trying so hard. It doesn't matter, So my suggestion is on the seekingintegrity.com site. The next work group starts early March. Sign up for level 1 if you haven't already, and also read Out of the Doghouse. Your thoughts, Dr. Rob?
Well, I can tell you some don'ts.
That's great.
I can't. Well, I'll just tell you overall that your expectations of this getting better anytime soon are way overblown. Your expectations of being the one who can make this any better are really out of the park. So let's just say a couple of things. Here's some don'ts. You can write this down. Don't apologize. Don't ask for forgiveness. Don't try to explain, oh, well, if I'd only known I was a sex addict, I wouldn't have ever done these. No. Don't say things like, but I've always loved you. So you have no defense here. You are completely responsible for your actions. It is not your partner's responsibility, nor should they have to respond to, please forgive me, let's go over this. Because when you say, I'm really, really sorry, please forgive me, what you're basically saying to your spouse is, when is this going to end? And again, I wrote it out of the doghouse. Thank you, Tammy, for marketing that book for me. Unfortunately, a publisher owns it, and I only get 12 cents every time it sells. And that's true. But what Out of the Doghouse is a book that I wrote because I've worked with so many men who've cheated, and they, men are answer driven. If somebody says is a problem, I don't want to hear what the problem is like you ladies want. I just want to say, oh, I know how to fix it like that. You all know that we are kind of, driven to give the answer as opposed to really listen to the problem. That's most men I know. So I was going to say about that. Um, oh, um, when it comes to betrayal, when it comes to what we've done to you, you would think, since we're the answer people and we like to have the answer as men, that we would know how to make this problem better. And yet I have watched men for 25 years, not a single one, be able to really work through what it took to understand and heal the betrayal with his partner. And so I wrote this book to tell men, look, if you're invested in healing this relationship, it's going to be a rough ride. You're going to have to do a lot of things and say a lot of things that you haven't done in order to help this heal. And all you get to feel about that is grateful that you even have the opportunity to begin to heal with this. The place I would start is, and let me just say this to you guys. When we work with couples in the beginning, we do couples therapy for one reason: to set boundaries. When are we going to see each other? When are we going to talk about this? When, how much am I going to tell you? Or when are we going to do disclosure? We do not do any kind of therapy in couples work for a long time, certainly a long time after disclosure, because usually what it is when we're working with the two of you together is it's the addict saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I wish you could forgive me. And the partner saying, you ruined my life. And that's all that really happens in the beginning. Part of the problem is that in life, my primary person to turn to is my married spouse. And I hope your primary person to turn to when there's a problem has always been your married spouse or your partner. But guess what? Your best friend, the one who knows you the best, that you live with, who you always turn to for support and love, can no longer be that. Because for the partner, you don't trust them. So why in the world would you, and you're furious at them. So why would you feel that safe going to them for support and direction? You wouldn't. And for us addicts, we've hurt those people. We've let them down. We can't expect that they're going to turn around and support us. So what we talk about, and the reason we don't do the couples therapy and all of that, is because we want you guys, an early part of this process, to turn outward for support. Use us, use the support groups, go to 12-step meetings, get a good therapist. All of us are going to cheer for your healing, but you can't turn to your spouse and expect it to be any better. All you can do is your part. Now, there are a couple of more don'ts I just want to mention. If you want your relationship to get better and you're really trying to be on the healing side, don't lie. Don't hide anything else after disclosure, and make sure disclosure is complete and do disclosure. And don't create anything else and lie about it. The worst thing you can do is begin the healing process and still have something going on that they will find out about. And I just had a client like that. Had been lying for 8 years to himself, to his 12-step program, to his partner. He has so much to clean up. It's very painful to watch. Tammy?
Next question. I would like to know what Dr. Rob's take is on sexuality versus addiction. I've been in recovery for many years, was married to a woman for 32 years, came out 6 years ago. In recovery, I meet a lot of married men that only have sex with men. They believe that same-sex alteration, I think that means attraction, is addiction. Want to know what you think.
I understood. So let me clarify and see if I understand the question. This person has an interest in same-sex behavior. And he, I'm guessing, is struggling with thinking of this as an addiction, especially if he's married or in a heterosexual relationship and this is the place he goes for secrecy. This is the place he goes for hiding. This is the place he goes to act out that nobody knows about, that he wants to know if that's kind of an addiction. Is that the question?
So this person was married to a female. This is a male, was married to a female.
Got that.
Divorced, came out 6 years ago, is trying to be in recovery, but is meeting a lot of married to heterosexual men.
I see.
Men who are attracted to men, but think it's only the addiction that is part of their same-sex attraction. Does that clarify?
Well, I'm just wondering who you're hanging out with. Are you hanging out with some winners who are learning to date and engage each other and enjoy each other as friends? Or, are you hanging out with people who are lying to their partners about who they have sex with? I mean, why would you be talking to men like that? And if they're in 12-step meetings, I would probably say, I need to step out of this conversation because I don't want anything reinforced or reminded of how I lived my life. And I certainly wouldn't want to question. Sexual orientation has nothing to do with sex addiction at all. I wrote a book about this called Cruise Control, Understanding Sex Addiction in Gay Men. This is part of the problem in that community, by the way, is the gay community has a different morals and different ethical and cultural views on sexuality. And to be quite honest, hanging out with a bunch of gay guys is kind of like being an alcoholic in a bar. Everyone's had sex, they're going to have sex, they have sex with friends. And that's fine for people in the community. It's not fine if you're a sex addict in recovery. So I would ask you, who are you hanging out with? Who are you spending in recovery? I wouldn't be spending time with the men who are still cheating on their wives. And I wouldn't necessarily be spending with men who are even questioning this, because sexual orientation, gender identity, and fetishism, none of those things, although you may not like them, be ashamed of them, you wish they'd go away, just because you don't like something about your sexuality or you find it odd or weird or downright bad, it doesn't mean that it's an addiction, and it doesn't mean it's going to go away. Ooh, Tammy.
These are men I know through sex
Ah,
origination. I believe sexuality and attraction are different. So,
right.
and
So
I
he
really,
is on the
so I
gay.
think
Go ahead,
that
Tammy.
the cusp of the question is that there are people that attribute their same-sex attraction only to addiction.
Right.
Is that, yeah,
Yes,
okay.
and because they want to get rid of it. And by the way, we're not allowed to do conversion therapy because it's unethical, which is the idea of trying to convert someone from gay to straight. It just will never happen. Um, but the new conversion therapy in some circles is now called sex addiction treatment, which is a way that when someone comes in and they're fearful or uncomfortable with their sexuality and they want to be this, that their homosexual behavior or their fetish or their trans or whatever it is they're into will be called addiction and then eliminated. The problem is those issues are not addictions. They're deep parts of who those people are, and you don't eliminate who you are. So, Tammy, you look unhappy.
Oh, well, no, because this person said, you are correct. I went through conversion therapy, and that's sad. So, okay,
It is
next
very sad.
question.
Although, can I say something about that?
Yeah, please.
The positive thing about conversion therapy from the men that I heard who went through it is they found more sexual partners in conversion therapy than they found anywhere else. And so it's got to be funny too, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that was probably the unintended consequences. So,
Right.
okay. My sex addicted husband has been sober for a year. Yay. He spent part of that time unemployed, but now has a really demanding job working from home. It seems like he's becoming a workaholic, although his claim is he needs to work around the clock because he's concerned about unemployment. Isn't completely dismissible considering his job history. Thoughts?
Why don't you start on that one, Tammy?
Well, to me, I'm like, as an addict, it's really easy for me to do it's all or nothing. And for me, working with intentionality to have balance, if he is putting this job above his relationship with you, above his recovery, all of those things, then often it is the stress of employment or whatever, that can be a trigger for relapse. So I would encourage him to look at what his sobriety plan is and make sure he's, getting the quality time he needs to maintain his recovery. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of studies about like working 24/7 is not actually beneficial even to the employer. We're less effective, all of the negative things happen. So balance is a key word to me.
Yeah, Tammy, you struck the nail on the head with that piece, because I think when I'm at our treatment center, when I'm working with the clients, I say to them while I'm teaching whatever, I said, I just want all of you to know that none of you are going to get to work more than 45 hours a week when you leave here. And I've had ER doctors and attorneys with big cases, but they get, especially when they come to treatment, that they can't live that way anymore. As addicts, I think we feel like we're invincible, that we can take on the world. That I know I did. It's like, I can get away with all this, and I can do this, and I can do that, and I can do that. Of course, I never looked at how often I got sick. I never really looked at that I wasn't doing the best job, but I thought in my mind I could carry all of this off. So when you get into recovery, I think it's more what I really learned, what we really learned is that we're actually not stronger, we're actually more vulnerable than most people. And being more emotionally vulnerable means you have to pay a lot of attention to how you spend your time and how much you rest. If you look at addiction as a form of mental illness, um, that's how I look at it. You could look at it however you want. But when I look at different forms of mental illness, like depression or anxiety, I know that people can have long periods of remission from those issues, but under great stress or when working 80 hours a week, that's when the depression shows back up. That's when the anxiety. So my concern is that he's not he has not slowed down enough to be in the pace of learning about himself and focusing on his recovery. The other thing I wanted to comment on was something Tammy said earlier, but I'll use a different term. Addiction is whack-a-mole. It really is. The drinking goes down, and then I'm eating a lot, and I stop eating, but I'm having sex with a lot of people. And wow, it may not be to those extremes, but we do bounce back and forth. It's not unusual for me to see a man who stopped sexually acting out gain 25 pounds for a whole bunch of reasons. So, trust your gut. If you felt like this man was emotionally unavailable because he was doing all that, and now he's emotionally unavailable or unavailable to the family because he's doing this, then nothing's really changed. He's just found a different ball has popped up out of that game.
One more thing I was thinking about was what a gift that he had a period of unemployment in his early recovery so that he could focus on that. It struck me, I had that happen to me early in recovery, and I really do look at it as a gift because it gave me the opportunity to not be stressed, to be able to focus on recovery, learn some different skills. But he's going to not have the opportunity to apply those if he's so focused now on I've got to work, I've got to work, I've got to work. So if he could change the view of that unemployment rather than it being a bad time or moral failing or whatever, and just go, wow, that was really a necessary time out, and how lucky was I to have that? How can I utilize that period of time moving forward in a different way? That may be helpful.
And I'll add one more thing from a 12-step
Okay.
perspective. If you're deeply involved in 12-step programs, you learn one of the things that they talk about is that if you really, really take this kind of thing seriously and you put your recovery first and not second to work or money, that your fear of financial insecurity will go away. That's what this process promises us. And I absolutely agree that I had to put my life in order and my recovery in order. And then I realized, well, I've never really, I realized how to live my financial life, or I was able to get the help that I needed because I wasn't spinning in all this other stuff. So it does sound like your spouse is putting work, money, achievement, feeling good about himself as a work, whatever that all means, fear of losing your family out of money, whatever all that stuff is, he's putting it in front of the most important thing, which is he slow down and focus on the healing and the long-term work he has to do to keep this chronic condition from reappearing. So trust your gut, girl.
Next question. I am so hungry for other people's emotional vulnerability. I couldn't stop myself from being emotionally vulnerable with others if I tried. I use sex as my portal to gain emotional intimacy from closed off lovers, or at the very least to simulate intimacy and connection with closed off lovers. Because of this compulsive need and behavior, I have self-diagnosed myself as a love addict and sex addict. Moving forward, I want so desperately to heal, but I'm afraid to really pursue my healing because every time I have distanced myself from a connection, simulations in the past,
right. The pursuit of connection.
I ended up supplementing with a different addiction, weed or food. How can I monitor and maintain my healthy, connected sexual interactions without perpetuating my addictive behaviors?
Well, that's a mouthful, but I think we
I
get it.
know.
Tammy, would you start with that? Because I think it actually speaks to the question we just answered on some ways about, whack-a-mole. But please.
Well, yeah. I was struck by I'm so desperate, for other people. And so I was actually a little challenged by that. I think you would do a better job clinically on that. But to me, it's like, if I want something so desperately, I'm so focused on, just that thing,
Right.
that I'm missing out on all the other aspects. And and I really believe that, so we've talked before about Dr. Stan Tatkin's We Do podcast with Dr. Rob, and what a healthy relationship is the two of us against the world. And if you're constantly having to pursue somebody who's closed off and is not really able to support you, you never get the benefit of being in a relationship where it's somebody that has your back, that the two of you are against the, facing, against the world. So, and as far as the weed and food and all that, I mean, that just spoke to I've got a hole in my soul, and I'm looking to fill it and numb it out in whatever form I possibly can. But at the end of the day, you're not being able to fully engage in what real life is, which is, true connection with other people. So that's my thoughts.
Should I tell her that I was single for 9 years while I worked on my recovery before I got married for 20? There's a couple of things I really, really relate. I want to say to you, before I was able to find healthy love and able to understand how to be with it. I could remember relationships where the only real, well, I'll say it this way. The only time I could get this person to say they love me was when we were having sex. I remember that so clearly. And so running to the sex for the affection and for the sense that I was loved kept me running back to that person over and over and over again until that relationship ended. But I think that is probably one of the more painful situations for us to be in, because what we want is so close to us, and yet sex seems to be the price we have to pay. And that is a whole bunch of other stuff from a whole bunch of other stuff in our past and future and all that. That's just not good mojo. The second thing I wanted to say about dating, remember I said I didn't date for a while, and what had to happen for me, and I love this example. I want to use an example from work. And what the example is never date out of need, date when you're ready to date. And so here's my story. Probably I used to run an agency without Tammy's help, all by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to hire various people, like people to answer the phone, just to see who can we help you, just that kind of role. And right before Christmas, 15 years ago, my receptionist quit or whatever it was. And so guess who was going to answer the phone on Christmas? It was on New Year's and all that. It was going to be me, the business owner, right? And the last thing I wanted to do was answer the phone, and so she quit. She gave notice December 1st. And I thought, oh my God, the holidays are coming. I got to hire somebody. Within 3-4 days, I found someone who I thought would work, and I had them in the role, and I was teaching them, and I felt better. And they were inevitably, because I did this a number of times, the worst employees I've ever had. And I realized, because I was in my own business for many years, that when I actually just took time I wasn't in a hurry, I wasn't in a rush, I had time to look at different people, consider things, run them by other people. When I was coming out of a more thoughtful place, I always hired the right person. And so I applied this to life, and I thought, my goodness, when I am in such need of relationships, friendships like this, I've got to find it. I'm going to choose the wrong people. And when I am already comfortable with getting the support I have, like friends and community and fun, I'm a lot more filled up and ready to show up and say, what do I want? And something else I was going to say about filling yourself up, and you actually find less and less what the need is about is someone help me enjoy life. Somebody help me have fun. Somebody help distract me. Someone help. The thing is, you need to do all that for yourself. You've got to find more friends. You've got to find more things that are fun. You have to fill that hole in your soul up for yourself, not because you're going to find somebody that way, but because who wants to live an empty life until you find the right person? You have to have the right life and then see who comes along. So I like that last line. You gotta have the right life and then see who comes along.
I
Go
like
ahead.
that too. Well,
Go
we'll
ahead.
put that on a card. Okay. I feel so, this is from a female partner. I feel so ambivalent about sex. Bad if I don't want to, bad if I do, bad if then I feel used. I don't think he is using me entirely, but I do feel pushed. I find myself angry at him and at myself. What does this mean? He doesn't seem to get the notion of being close yet not overly sexual, or am I being overly sensitive? Don't engage, just okay to be close.
Okay. So I just want to kind of pick this apart a little bit. I'm looking at the question.
Mm-hmm.
Bad if I don't want to, bad if I do. So we don't have all of the answers here, but do you feel bad if you don't, okay, how do I say this? Why is it so important to have sex, I guess is my question. And if you're living with someone who's troubled around sex, it's not your job to give this person sex. It's not your job to supply this person with sex. If you don't have sex with them for a year, that doesn't mean they're going to do anything like go back to their old behavior. That would be up to them. It would never be acceptable to me to be pushed into sex. I don't think you could push a recovering person into sex, because sex for us is not just like vaginal or anal intercourse or oral. I mean, it's kissing and holding and connecting. And someone asked earlier, why is it harder for us to have sex with our partners? Because when we are with strangers, it's this whole part of our brain that lights up around intensity and objectification. And it's exciting, it's scary. But when you're with the same person for 12 years, I've seen that but before. I mean, no, if I'm not going to get the same intensity, excitement as I am having sex with a stranger while my spouse is waiting for me in the next room. I mean, that's just mind blowing. So coming to a partner and having sex out of intimacy is a much more vulnerable, much more evolved, most sex addicts don't even know how to do that. We just know how to have this. And when it comes to this, for me, inside of me, truly emotionally, as many sex addicts, as much as I love you as my partner, I'd rather read. Because it requires emotional vulnerability and really being it's not about you. That's what I want to say. It really isn't about you. It is about our own struggle inside of ourselves to allow ourselves to be intimate every single time. Yeah. Does that help?
Well, so if you're the partner and you're like, should I do it or should I not do it? I'm
Well,
mad
what
if
does
I do it.
she
I'm
want to
mad I
do?
don't. So
That was my,
I know
what does
that's, yeah,
she want to do? That's the question. By the way, if you have to have sex, you can get a vibrator. You don't have to have it with him, and if you do want to have sex with him, but you don't feel safe, go back to your vibrator. Here's my message to every spouse who struggles with this is, and this is the best answer. You'd write this down, please tattoo it on your hand. I say to every woman and man who's in this situation, why would you have sex with someone that you do not trust? And if I said to you that this was a relative stranger, and I know you don't trust them so well, you never know what they're going to be up to, but go have sex with them, you would say, I wouldn't have sex with someone that I don't barely know and wouldn't trust. Well, guess what? If you're living with a sex addict who's been lying to you for 10 years, you barely know them, and they are not people you can trust. So don't have sex with us. It's not time until you feel safe. And when your husband, by the way, starts pressuring you, and I don't know what that looks like, pushed, but I can imagine it would be things like, well, are we ever going to have sex? And when is it, stuff like that. That's when I would say, do you mind looking for something out in the hall? I think I forgot it. And I would get him out of the bedroom and lock the door and say, have a good night. That's what I do then.
great answer. Thank you. Okay, next question. Do sex addicts objectify acting out? Do they objectify their spouses as well?
Well, this is the problem. We're not able to objectify our spouses. Now we can close our eyes and pretend you're someone else, but it's hard for someone to objectify something they see all the time and have access to all the time, because objectified literally means I'm taking a fantasy in my head and I'm putting it over there, and I'm thinking that it fits all of the slots in my fantasy, and so, but it's not real. So what else do I want to say about that? One of the things that we have to learn in recovery is to stop objectifying. It's not that we won't find people attractive, and that's hard for you spouses, because even in recovery, I'm going to look up and say, oh, that person's attractive. And then hopefully, like a healthy person, I'm just going to move on. But you guys get very triggered, as you would. Tammy has allergies, by the way. I didn't want to tell you this, but she's scratching her eyes and she's scratching her nose because it's that time of year in Arizona. And she's trying to hide it with her Ricola, but it's not working for her. Anyway, so don't have sex with people you don't trust. And do you want to ask one more question? I know we have so many.
We have a bunch tonight.
There's one about Valentine's Day, but that's already over.
Well,
go ahead.
I'm
Any
kind of
question
taking
you
them
want.
in order. Okay, so I'm taking them in order. I have a hard time to live with the addict. I don't see much empathy from this guy, but I do see that he has been getting help and going to 12-step programs. He keeps on telling me that he has to fix himself. I am seeing a therapist as well, but the pain is so much that I can hardly breathe time to time. How can I ask him to give me more care and empathy while he is fixing himself?
Well, I think you can ask. Um, I'm going to be really mean now in a nice way. One of my supervisors used to say to me, people in hell ask for ice water, but that doesn't mean they're going to get it. And, or a nicer way of saying it would be, you can only go to an empty well so many times and then figure out there's nothing there for you. And I think it takes a long time to um, to for us to even understand what you're going through, and then for us to begin to respond in a healthy way, not because you asked us to, but because we understand what you're going through. And when I said I wrote Out of the Doghouse for men who did not understand how to heal betrayal in a woman, which is every man I've ever met, I meant it for someone like you to read and throw at your husband and say, this is what I need, because that book is written from the perspective of what a woman needs to heal. I've worked with enough of you to hear about safety and trust and behavior, and I get it. And so I wrote it all down for them in this book. And I said, guys, if you want to stay in this relationship and you've done the things that you've done, this is what it's going to take. And they get it. I will say that Tammy and I hear a lot. My spouse is in 9 months of recovery, but he's still a jerk. What's the problem? And I write about this, I talk about this, I tell the guys about this, and I say this is a challenge for the spouses, is that you have been through so much pain and disappointment with us that you absolutely deserve us to not only stop acting out, but for us to be kinder and warmer and more empathic and less narcissistic. You deserve all of that and more. The thing is that if we just stopped acting out 3 months ago or 6 months ago, all we could probably focus on is not acting out and becoming a more empathic, gentle, supportive, reflective person takes a long time. So while your partners may want that from us, I don't think you should judge our recovery on whether we're warmer, kinder, and friendlier. We may not know how to be. Judge on recovery. Are we going to 12-step meetings? Are we going to therapy? Are you going to groups like this? Are they listening to the podcast? Are they, how are they acting as in general? But the real intimacy and the connection you're looking for and the kindness, you have to understand that we shove you away for a long time. In order for us to hurt you the way we do, we reject you in our heads constantly. We don't allow ourselves to look at you with warmth and kindness because we push you away so we can go do this. So in allowing ourselves to go through the layers of seeing your beauty emotionally and in every other way takes time, because we have pushed that actively away to justify what we were doing out there. And when we stop doing what we're doing out there, we are not quite ready, nor do we necessarily know how to appreciate you. But Tammy, I appreciate you.
Well, I do too, and I want to just add on. I mean, I appreciate you too, but one of the things I mentioned, I think last week was like, he's in like kindergarten. Like, if you just remember, he's in kindergarten for learning this. You want him to be writing his college dissertation, and he can't do that. It's like he doesn't have the skills yet. He doesn't have the knowledge. He can learn. If you're seeing progress, that's a very positive thing. It does take a long time. There are things that can expedite it. Dr. Rob has shared before that, like the guys that come to our treatment program get a lot of help in a short amount of time, so they, the trajectory can be, shortened. But it just takes time. We as addicts didn't have the basic skills to do life, and so in recovery we get to learn those, but we don't have to do it alone. So,
and you need to get a lot of support. What I didn't hear that should be in the way you're thinking is what I've loved to have seen your question in your question is, I've been going to a lot of groups with other women or men, and I'm beginning to hear how being cheated on leaves other people with these feelings too. And other people are dealing, because there's something about being in support groups where, I've heard you spouses say, oh, I don't want to be in a group where a bunch of other people are betrayed. What a bunch of losers. And, or they're not going to have any hope, or they're going to have this or that. And the reality is you get in that room and you see somebody else who's intelligent and attractive and interesting and kind, and it happened to them too. That is such a gift to you guys to realize on every level with all these beautiful people who are struggling, it is just not about you. You can't, it couldn't possibly be about you, because look at all these lovely people and happen to them too. And so if for nothing else, I'd really recommend you join a support group. They're free. And that's, I think, where you'll find more healing for yourself than you will with your spouse, at least in the beginning. And with that,
Agreed.
Tammy, I hope
We're
you
done.
take some
Come back next week.
anti-whatevers.
More Ricolas. It's all good. So,
See
all
you
right.
guys later.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.